don't take on a massive remodel for your first investment. I don't like rules. I don't like saying, never do this, never do that. But that's one of those things I kind of make an exception for. So much can go wrong. Even now with my experience in doing so many deals, if I take on a massive remodel, I feel like half the time we barely make any money on it because we find there's so many problems that come up. It takes so much longer. And then a lot of times there's issues between us and our contractors because they get frustrated. Maybe they took on too much of a job because they're not going to tell you no, they're going to try and make it work. And so even if you think you're going to make less money, take on a smaller, easier rehab for your first deals. And in reality, you'll probably make more money on those than taking on the massive ones that come with so many more problems.
Mark, thank you for joining me for our Thought Leader Spotlight series. I'm your host, Matt Camp, head of partnerships for DealMachine. And on these, we really like to shine a industry spotlight on experts like yourself and hear your inspiring stories and educate our audience on the lessons that you've learned over the years. So I'm really excited to welcome on Mark Ferguson. I know you're the founder of investformore.com. Been an agent investor for over 20 years. You're a top, real estate investing author. You've got 10 books out, including a new one called My Crazy Insane True Stories as a Real Estate Entrepreneur. Love that one. You put out great content on social between Instagram, YouTube, you're sharing your knowledge all over the place. And then, as an investor yourself, I know you flipped over 130 houses, own more than 200,000 square feet in rentals, and own your own brokerage, among other businesses lately. So have plenty we can talk about there. Really excited to have you on, Mark.
Oh, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it. And yeah, it should be fun.
Yeah. And to kind of start, I loved hearing more about your story. Can you maybe talk about how you got into real estate, your journey to getting started? Would love to hear more about that.
Yeah. So, it started at a very young age for me. I can remember sleeping under my dad's desk in his real estate office when I was 3 or 4. And he was an agent for many years. And I grew up really liking houses and the idea of real estate, but I kind of got into high school and that all just disappeared. Like I didn't want anything to do with real estate. I don't know, it's just me rebelling or wanting to make my own path, but I didn't want a thing to do with it. And so I ended up going to college for civil engineering at the University of Colorado in Boulder. I went in that program for 1 year and I got to Calc 2 and hated it. I thought I don't want to spend the rest of my life doing complicated math. And I know maybe that wouldn't have been the case, but it was a good way to push myself into business. And so I went to the business school, ended up graduating on time still, going to summer school, really trying to get that done. And when I graduated from college, I still didn't want anything to do with real estate, but I wanted to make a lot of money somehow. And I couldn't find anybody who would just give me a job for $100,000 a year straight out of college back then for some reason. I don't know why, but so I looked at banking and different things and nothing really felt like anything I really wanted to do. And so I thought, okay, I'll go back home. I'll work part-time for my parents and figure out what I want to do. And so I ended up coming back to Greeley, Colorado, and was literally doing like manual labor on some of my dad had a couple flips going or one flip going at a time, had a couple rentals, and I would mow lawns and paint. And then my sister managed a large apartment complex. So I became the on-site manager there to save money on rent and kind of called myself the pool boy at that time since there was a pool that I took care of as well. But again, I wasn't like, oh my God, I want to be a real estate investor. This is what I want to do. I just kind of kept going into the business. I realized I liked houses. And then I saw my friends in the corporate world who had jobs at big companies, and I feel like 90% of them just hated their lives. They hated the work schedule, their bosses, they made very little money. And so I was like, well, I don't think I want to do that. Maybe I have a good gig going with this real estate thing. So I looked into it more. I could set my own schedule, do my own thing. I've always been kind of someone who doesn't do well with authority or people telling me what to do. So it was nice to have that flexibility. And so I decided, all right, I'll get my real estate license. I'll kind of learn more about this real estate thing and go from there. And so I got my license. I've always been kind of an introvert as well. So even though I have YouTube and social media and stuff, I'm still, I hate talking on the phone. I like doing kind of my own thing. It's actually almost easier for me to talk on a camera than to somebody in person, which seems weird, but and so being an agent wasn't like the most amazing thing for me, but I still made myself do it. I met people, I did okay. And along the way, my dad would flip a house now and then, and I kind of finagled my way into that business a little bit, where I would, mow lawns, start painting, and sell light fixtures. And eventually he started to give me a very tiny percentage of the profits. And so that really got me interested. And so kind of the very first flips I did were with him, where I was just doing a lot of manual labor and getting a very small percentage, but I didn't understand, the financing part, a lot of the other side of it. So that opened my eyes to the business a little bit. And then once I started doing one or two, I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. This is fun. And I just kind of dove into the, how we get deals, how we finance the properties, the contractors we use, all that side of it. And I just was looking at how can we make all this better? And, almost everything at that time we bought from the public trustee, a foreclosure sale. And I knew there's more opportunity there. So I just kind of worked on getting more deals, doing better designs on the properties, just trying to improve everything, all while being an agent. And it worked out okay, but it really, there was a good 5 or 6 years there where I was making enough money to survive and buy a house, but that was about it. And when I say buy a house, this was 2003, when anybody could buy a house with pretty much any kind of loan and income, to say, oh yeah, I make this much money. Okay, here's your house. So it was interesting getting started. It was something I kind of fell into, but once I got into it, I realized, wow, there's a lot of really cool things about real estate. And even though it took me a while to really gain my footing, obviously I'm really glad I did it. And it helped having my dad there push me along the way a little bit. But at the same time, I didn't really take off and really get going until I found my own way, my own path. And that was actually REOs and foreclosures with banks. We can talk about that if you want, but that's kind of the very beginning of my real estate career.
Yeah. I think, regardless, I know you said it took a little while for you to get into real estate, but I think sounds like pretty naturally entrepreneurial, just based on, the flexibility you were looking for and how you were naturally gravitating towards trying out different businesses, before real estate. Is there anything there that looking back, any experiences you had growing up that you think help instill that in you? Or is there anything, I know you have, a couple of kids as well yourself. I don't know if there's anything that you're trying to help, them explore. Just curious on kind of that, what naturally, helped you find that.
Right. And that's a really good question. I think as long as I can remember, I've always kind of wanted to do my own thing. Like even, I played sports, I played basketball and baseball. And I hated being told what to do. And that's not a very good, asset if you want to be an employee or work for somebody else. And if I agreed with them, I'm like, okay, cool. I'll work hard. I'll do whatever you need. But as soon as I don't know if that's a good decision, then I start thinking, hey, we should do this instead. And if they don't agree with me, then I'm like, well, that's, it kind of bothers you. So I think even as a kid, I always had that kind of entrepreneurial spirit where I wanted to make the decisions and be the boss. Even in college, my favorite class was an entrepreneur class where we had to run a fake company, and I kind of took over for the whole team and made all the decisions. And
that's cool.
So even from the beginning, and I don't know if that's something that is just natural, because with my kids now, I talk to them about business and money, and they're kind of like, okay, but I don't see that same thing yet. Maybe they're only 10 right now, so maybe that'll change. 10 and 2 10-year-olds and a 2-year-old. We'll see how that goes. But I'm definitely trying to teach them the money and the business side of things. And my son, I think, is slowly starting to get the idea of it. So it's cool to see that.
That's really cool. Yeah. Do you, do you think, I know you kind of over time realize hey, this real estate thing might be for me. And, you got your first experience, getting into it like that. For a lot of people listening to this, there are many newbies who are thinking about real estate or looking to that first deal. They're starting to get into it. Is there anything that, in terms of advice for them on how they can kind of dip their toe in the water and start getting involved and start to see if this is for them that you'd recommend they take action on?
That can be one of the trickiest parts. A lot of people ask me too, how do you get started? How do you, jump into real estate, especially, prices are pretty high right now. Barriers to entry can be kind of high. And, the very first house I bought on my own was a personal house I lived in. And I tell people all the time, if you want to kind of jump in with a low risk, learn the business way to do it, buying a house to live in is a great way to do it. And you can use almost all the same things you would use investing to buy that house. You can get a great deal. I wish I would have done that, because I got an okay deal, but I didn't get a great deal. You can put less money down. You can put 3.5% down with FHA. If you happen to be VA, 0, USDA in the rural areas can be 0. And instead of putting 20% down or more in an investment property, or trying to find, a private lender, which can be tricky, but possible, you can put a lot less down. And you have a place to live. So if you really screw it up, if you spend too much money, you just buy a house that, even if the market changes, you still have a place to live. So it's kind of like a really nice safety net if you mess up. And you can turn that property into a rental. Most loan programs let you do it after a year. Live there a year, turn into a rental after that. You can flip it. If you wait 2 years, you probably won't pay taxes on the profit, thanks to owner occupant tax rules in the United States. So, I'm not an accountant or giving tax advice, but there's so many cool opportunities there from buying a house to live in to really get started investing in real estate that I wish I would have done. Because I think I bought my house in 2003 for 190 and sold it in 2009 for 180. And that was after spending some money on it, So, but even then, I still am glad I did it. It's still a really cool experience. And I went through the worst crash in US history while doing it. So I think that's a really good opportunity for people to get started without taking a huge amount of risk, without spending a whole lot of money. And then even if things don't work out, you still have a place to live.
For sure. Yeah. And I know you touched on like, hey, where do we go when the prices are so high right now? You put out a lot of great content on the housing market and your thoughts of where we're headed and, trends and things like that. I'd love to get your take there on, obviously we don't have a crystal ball, but if you're adjusting your real estate strategy, your investing strategy based on where you think we're headed. And especially I know for our newbies is like, we hear a lot around, hey, when's the right time to buy? Like, how do you address that as well?
Yeah. The first thing I would say is, I've never tried to time markets. I think that is one of the toughest things for the very smartest economists in the world to do, let alone me, who is not one of the smartest economists in the world. There's just so many variables and so many things going on. It's really hard to know what the future will hold. As you said, now we can make guesses and estimate things. And I do try and do that. Like I said, I was in business during the crash last time. And I would talk with my dad once in a while. I'll be like, why are these banks giving people 120% loan to value loans, which means like your house is worth 100,000 and they'll literally loan you $120,000. Why as an investor can I put almost nothing down without showing my taxes? Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, and he's like, well, maybe it's safer than credit cards. I don't know. So even back then, although a lot of people didn't see that massive crash coming, like a lot of weird stuff was going on.
Fundamentals.
And we just don't see that now. So that's the first thing, is lending is stricter now than it has ever been, pretty much in the history of the United States banking system for housing. And there's still not enough houses, right? We're still millions of houses short. People have, last I checked, the most equity they've ever had in the history of the housing market. And there's 65% owner occupancy rate in the United States, which is not quite as high as pre-crash. That was the highest level, but still really high. And people, we hear it all the time, are still trying to buy houses, can't buy houses. So I hear people saying everything's unaffordable, they can't buy houses, but there's so many people trying to buy who can afford houses, they just can't find them. So I honestly think houses are still affordable because people can buy them. And if you look at other countries in the world, I think the US is number 3 for the most affordable housing market in the world. I think it's Saudi Arabia and South Africa are ahead of us, and they have massive federal housing programs to make housing cheaper. So having said all that, the basic fundamentals that caused our last crash were horrible lending guidelines and way too many houses being built. There were just, way more houses being built before 2008 than now. And we have more population now, and those aren't happening. So I think the only way we can see a crash, and I define a crash as a 20% drop, is if they build literally 5 times more houses than they are now, which I don't ever see them doing. And lending guidelines drop significantly. And I don't see that happening either. So without a crystal ball and guaranteeing anything, I could definitely see the housing market just continue on its current trend, maybe not quite as steep as it is now, but definitely keep going up. And I think the fundamental reason that prices are going up is the cost to build properties. Building supplies are up, labor is up, cost of utilities are up. Cities keep making it tougher and tougher to build, all while at the same time they're saying they want affordable housing. So if they can't make houses cheaper and we have a shortage of housing, I don't see how prices are going to decrease.
Yeah, and like you said, it's a supply and demand thing. I mean, when demand is this crazy high and inventory is still all-time low, I mean, it makes for a strong market. So
yeah.
So how, I know you guys are still doing many deals in any type of market, and you do it very quickly too. Can you maybe give our audience a playbook on how you're doing so many deals, and then how you do them quickly as well?
Right. And first off, I'd say I wish we could do more deals, just like most people. It is getting tougher for us too, just because there's still record low inventory in our area, as there are most areas. And that's a really good indicator too of pricing, as well as what the current inventory is. But when I find a deal, I still buy a lot from the MLS. So we buy from the MLS, the multiple listing service, where agents list properties. We buy from wholesalers. We do some of our own direct marketing, buy from FSBOs, networking. So we have a lot of different sources, which helps. But if, like, say a deal comes up on the MLS, which is rare, but it does happen. We got one under contract last week from the MLS. Basically, it helps me being an agent and broker for sure. So I can set up a showing, go see that property in an hour, maybe less, and I can walk through it, 15 minutes, see the major, pros, cons of the property, see if there's any major concerns, roof, foundation, try and peek at the wiring and plumbing if I can. And then I can usually make a decision in that 15 minutes of, all right, is it worth pursuing this deal? What are we going to offer? And then I can text my assistant and say, hey, write up an offer for this property. He can write it up in 15 minutes, send it through DocuSign to me. I can sign it, and we can have that offer sent to the agent in an hour or 2 hours. So now for a newbie who just heard that, they're probably like, oh my God, I could never do that. That makes it kind of tricky, but it's not impossible, but that's one huge advantage of being an agent and having your license and being a full-time investor, is you can do that. Now, if you're a newbie, this is why it's really, really good to have a great agent who works for you. And I would say that they don't even have to be investor friendly. They just have to be able to be fast and show you that house quickly and write that offer for you quickly, and not take 2 or 3 days to get you in there. So I always like to tell people, if you're working with an agent, they shouldn't tell you what to invest in. They shouldn't tell you what a good deal is. That's your job as the investor. Their job is to maybe find some of those deals that meet your criteria and get you in there as quickly as possible and write that contract as quickly as possible and be somewhat competent doing it. So that's kind of, and when we write that offer, like I said, we don't do inspections. We don't have appraisals. I use a lot of private money to buy it. So it acts like cash, but at the same time, we're not using our own cash. And that also gets us more deals as well. So again, there's a lot of stuff there that as you gain more experience, become, more involved in real estate, it gets easier to do. But new investors can still do a lot of that on their own with the right people helping them out.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I mean, I think the off market piece, that's where we specialize, right? So I know you can definitely, like you said, look, MLS is getting harder and harder on market, but from finding a deal perspective, I know that's something that people is extremely valuable to bring to the table for people. So we're always putting out great content on that side as well to keep exploring this YouTube channel as well. But yeah, you guys, one thing I really admire as well is I know you move really quickly in the repair process. Like in that rehab process, you keep it very affordable and are able to continue to transact quickly. Do you have any tips or lessons learned there that you can share with our audience, especially for like those first time flippers?
Right. And first off, we could always move quicker. So that's always it's always a frustrating part of it, because no matter how much you work on the system and try and tweak it, everything takes longer than you think. And it always costs longer than you think. Like that's one of my main points, telling people, like, the first thing, if you're going into a rehab for a flip or rental, or this is why it's actually nicer to rehab a house you live in, because you're not under those like crazy time constraints, and you're not spending $3,000 a month on expenses while you're trying to get all this done, or even more. But we spend a lot of time really working hard to find great contractors who are affordable, and we manage a lot of the process too, which also helps. So, and this is something that can be tricky when you're starting out, but when you're starting out, you can start building a database of people you work with from the very beginning. So I have a project manager, Nikki, who helps with most of the repair process. She's texting the contractors, telling them what designs to use, scheduling subs. She actually kind of acts like a contractor herself, almost like a GC. And so we'll have, a plumber, an electrician, a roofer, a painter, a flooring person, who all kind of are subs who will do their job separate from like the contractor or handyman. And then the contractor or handyman will do, doors, windows, any, framing, carpentry needed, install kitchens, maybe redo bathrooms, things like that. And so by using all these people together, it makes it management a little more time consuming, but we often can get things done way cheaper, and we can get them done faster because we don't have one guy trying to do everything, or we don't have a GC who's trying to manage everything and this 7 other projects, on his own at the same time, and he's marking up everything. So that makes it a lot easier for us, although, like I said, it's a little more time consuming. And then one thing we use too is a Home Depot Pro account, which really helps out with our supply material management. We pay for all the supplies and materials ourselves. And so the contractors don't have to worry about it. They don't have to shop around. And that means we can pay them less money. We don't have to worry about markups on that material. And then we literally can do their text to confirm program, where a contractor goes into Home Depot, says, I need to buy this, this, and this. Home Depot texts Nikki. She looks at it, presses 1, it pays for it just like that.
That's a really good tip.
Yeah, it makes it so much easier. And then the contractors love it. And we can also keep most of our people busy full time. So that means they don't have to go out there marketing, trying to sell people on their job, which means we can get them more affordable, keep them busy, and that makes them happy as well. But having said all that, as a new investor, one of my first things I tell people is don't take on a massive remodel for your first investment. I don't like rules. I don't like saying, never do this, never do that. But that's one of those things I kind of make an exception for. So much can go wrong. Even now, with my experience in doing so many deals, if I take on a massive remodel, I feel like half the time we barely make any money on it, because we find there's so many problems that come up. It takes so much longer. And then a lot of times there's issues between us and our contractors because they get frustrated. Maybe they took on too much of a job, because they're not going to tell you no, they're going to try and make it work. And so even if you think you're going to make less money, take on a smaller, easier rehab for your first deals. And in reality, you'll probably make more money on those than taking on the massive ones that come with so many more problems.
Yeah. So that team of contractors as well, do you have any advice on how to find those, how to vet those out, how to assemble that team?
Yeah. So we spend a lot of time on that side. So
I'm sure.
It's like, if I'm interviewing someone who's going to be employee for me and work in my office, like we go through that same process for a contractor almost, right? We don't just find some guy on Craigslist, talk to him once and say, all right, let's go start the job, right? We look, we send them an email. So we'll look at, Craigslist, Angie's List, Home Advisor, Facebook Marketplace. You can find a lot of stuff now. And of course, we'll ask friends, family, coworkers, people we network with. But no matter what kind of reference they get, we're going through the same process where we pretty much send them an email and have a list of like 10 questions we ask them, what their specialties are, if they're available, if they have tools, if they have transportation, if they're licensed, if they have insurance, etc. And then 50% of people won't even respond to that email. And then we automatically will knock them off our list. And then if they respond to that email, makes sense, we'll usually schedule a meeting with them in person. They'll come to my office, we'll talk to them, we'll make sure they drove here and didn't get dropped off, because that can be an issue sometimes. I had one contractor who I met at a job, and at the end of, he's bidding it, and at the end of the bid, he's like, yeah, my last job, I got a DUI because I was drinking on the job home. And some lady turned me in, he's like, and I can't believe, I'm like, the dude just told me he got a DUI at a job
That
interview.
stuff.
I'm like, that don't ever do that, man. So, but yeah, so once we meet them in person, then if everything goes okay, we'll meet them at a job, we'll walk through a house and have them give us a bid on a small job, not like the whole thing. We don't want to get like a $30,000 or $40,000 remodel going with someone we just met. We'll be like, hey, let's start with this bathroom, see how you do. If things go well, we'll move on to something bigger. And that takes a little longer, but it will save us some massive problems if they won't work out.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, we take a definitely a similar approach when it comes to like finding and hiring drivers for a driving team as well.
Right.
Yeah, it's like, hey, most people you reach out to, even if they apply for it, may or, like you said, send out that initial email, do initial test, and that'll already, the cream of the crop will usually rise pretty quickly, through that whole process. So, yeah, one question I did have too. I know you were talking about that you guys use private money often. I know that's something that I'd love for you to talk about a little bit of how to go about doing that. How do you, find investors like that? How do you build credibility with those investors, especially if you're a new investor? Would love advice there.
Yeah. So when we first started out, we're doing almost all bank money, and a lot of that was pre-crash and much easier. So they literally give you a line of credit and you can spend the money however you wanted. That changed very quickly, got much more difficult. So I still used bank money for a long time. I was putting probably 25% down on most of the flips we did, 20% down on the rentals I bought. And like that adds up after a while, you can do some refinances, take money out, but still it's tricky to scale quickly, putting that much down and then paying for all the repairs and carrying costs and everything. So I actually had an investor reach out to me who used to flip houses and be one of our big competitors in the area. And he had kind of calmed down and relaxed a little bit about, wasn't really buying as much anymore. It's like, hey, are you interested in borrowing money from me to do flips? And I had never even thought about it. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting idea. And so we talked about it, and he'd do 100% financing. I get approval in an hour. I literally send him a text, say, hey, you want to do this deal? He's like, okay. And I'm like, God, this is so easy. So it cost me more money. Like the interest rates are definitely higher than banks, but it was so much easier and I could get it done so much faster, which in turn can almost, let you get more deals. So the other thing I had was the banks were, used to take 2 weeks to do a deal. Now they're taking 3 weeks. Now they're taking longer. And if I'm trying to get a really good deal and I say, hey, we can close this fast. And they're like, oh, how fast? I'm like, well, a month. Like, that's not that fast. But my private money guy, I'm like, well, we can close in a week if title can do it. Then, that's a huge advantage to getting those deals too. So we came up with an agreement, and I thought, man, this is really cool. I should think about this. And so I actually talked to my sister. We do some private money deals with her. Just having my social media presence, I had people reach out to me all the time to lend us private money. I reached out to another investor who used to flip houses in the area who I know stopped, talked to him. He's like, oh, sure. Yeah, we can do that. So one thing I think people let stop them and get in their way, especially with friends and family, is they're scared. They don't want to lose money. They think they're asking for this huge favor from people. They think that they're almost begging for this deal, where in fact, if you're paying, a pretty high percent rate, you're backing it by a real asset, a house. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement, right? You are helping them make more money on their investment by something that's backed by a real asset, as opposed to, stocks or something else where maybe they're making a little bit more, but they could have nothing behind it security wise. Or so many people have their money in like a CD or something. It's crazy. It still blows my mind how many people do that. And you can give them, 5 times the return of what they're making. Maybe not quite that much, depends on what rates are. But it can be mutually beneficial for both parties. And once you get into that mindset, it's not just, you're not begging for money. You're not trying to ask for this favor. You're helping them too. Then it really can change your outlook and your confidence in asking for that money and realizing, hey, it's a good thing for everybody.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, because I do think there's a fair number of people on here that they are interested in being naturally with what we do. They're, interested on the deal finding side. They can bring the deal to the table. But once you do that, yeah, can you get really specific on how that partnership would look of like, hey, if you approach, family or friends or somebody else for on the private money side, exactly how you'd walk through an agreement like that and any other like common pitfalls that you see, for that first time?
Right. And I think a lot of people, they try to partner sometimes with people Just to partner. And I don't like partnering with people. I have one partner who I've done 2 deals with because they're very large deals, millions of dollars. And I simply didn't have the money or the bank connections he did to do the deal. So it worked out for both of us, but we needed each other to do that. I see a lot of people who want to partner just to partner because they're scared of risk or they want to share the risk. But when I do a private money deal, I am not sharing equity. I am not saying, hey, I'm get 50% of the profits, you get 50%, I do all the work. I am doing a straight loan. So that I feel like that makes it so much more clear for everybody. There's less things that can go wrong. There's less questions about your expenses and profit and what you actually made. And then like I said, I'm a control freak, an entrepreneur, then I get the profit so I can control the process and figure out how much I'm making. If I screw it up, it's my fault. If I do great, then it's my fault too. But I don't have to worry about them, being worried about the profit in the end. They know they're getting their money. So like, I think the first private money deal I did, it was 11% interest rate and 2 points. And so, yeah, it's a high interest rate and that's a lot of points. But if we're making $30,000 or $40,000 in a flip in 6 months, it's worth it, after those costs. And if this private money allows me to do 3 flips versus 1, obviously that's a good deal, making that extra money and paying those financing costs. And so how I would structure it is, since I'm an agent, again, really huge advantage, I have access to be able to write a deed of trust, write a promissory note through my MLS documents in Colorado. So I'm allowed a very limited amount of ability to practice law in Colorado as an agent. And one of those is filling out pre-made forms. And one of those is the deed of trust, promissory note. I can fill those out, write on the interest rate, make it a long term, usually for a flip. And then we send that to the title company, tell them how we're financing it. The title company talks to the lender, they wire the money, like that's all taken care of on that side. They record the documents, get it all done there. And I bring a little bit of money I need. Sometimes I get money back at closing, depending on how we do it, which is kind of cool. But it's actually a pretty simple process when you just have a loan with an interest rate. Mm-hmm. We do interest only payments. So it's a $100,000 loan and a 10% interest rate. I'm paying $10,000 a year in monthly installments. So pretty simple. And then at closing, usually how we would do it is if it's a $100,000 loan and I'm paying 2 points, which basically means you're paying 2% of the loan amount, or $2,000. I'll have my private lender wire $98,000 to the title company, and that way he's got a loan for $100,000. He wired $98,000, and that got him his 2 points. Mm-hmm. And then I just bring that to closing if I need to. But it's not a super complicated process. Like I said, if you're not an agent, if you don't have that those forms in your state, you can have an attorney write them up for the first 1 or 2 deals, and honestly, probably just keep using them over and over again. And but if you do straight interest rate, simple interest, it's not that complicated.
Yeah. I appreciate you breaking it down so simply like that. This has been an awesome conversation. I appreciate you having you on, and you taking some time out for us too. But one last thing I did want to touch on. I know at the beginning I said you had a new book that just came out as well. I love the title, My Crazy Insane True Stories as a Real Estate Entrepreneur. Can you tell any just our audience, what inspired you for for this book, and then maybe a story or two? Don't want to ruin the whole thing.
Oh yeah, no, of course. Yeah. So it's kind of funny because I started my blog investormore.com in 2013. I don't think I'd written a thing except for like a very simple letter since college. And my buddy Justin, who works with me now, he's like, hey, you should start a blog. I'm like, what's a blog? He's like, you just write articles. It's cool. I'm like, okay. So I started writing articles. They were horrible. My grammar was horrible. My spelling was horrible. But eventually I'm like, oh, this is really cool. So I ended up writing books and educational books and different things along the way, which really helped people. And that's like, oh, wow, this is really cool too. So as an author, I am not like an English major who always wanted to be a writer. It's just was something where I'm like, hey, I can share my knowledge and learn along the way. So that's been pretty cool to be able to have. This my 10th book, which seems crazy, but so this book isn't as much like how to buy rentals or how to flip houses. It's just, for some reason, I have a whole lot of crazy stuff that happens to me. So part of that's just being in real estate and doing a lot of deals. But I show a lot of them on my YouTube channel, Invest for More YouTube, And a lot of my viewers are like, you need to write a book about all this stuff. Like there's so much crazy stuff that happens to you. I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. So I think I have 21 or 22 stories in this one book. And that was like half of the ones I wanted to write about. So I might have to have a sequel here too. But like some of the most recent ones, you know, we bought a 7-unit kind of apartment / house place that we call the complex. And the tenant owned a tire shop there and we inherited that tenant. He didn't pay rent for 4 months. We filed the eviction notice. This was happening during COVID, so it's very tricky, but we're getting through it. And so a month or 2 weeks before his eviction, he also got evicted from his tire shop he owned. And so he dropped off 500 tires onto the property behind another tenant's unit. And so we had to not only evict him, but his 500 tires. So we had a crew just loading tires into dumpsters. We convinced our dumpster company we had 4 roll-off dumpsters, like the biggest ones you could get, put all the tires into them. During the eviction, he has 24 hours to get those tires or any property off, and then we can do what we want with them. So 24 hours were up. He literally moved like 7 tires and was super pissed at us. We're like, dude, you're not doing anything. So of course, cops were called and arguments and stuff this whole time. But after the 24 hours were up, we convinced the dumpster tire company to come pick up all the dumpsters, and they end up just dropping them off at a dairy who uses the tires to cover their silage pits and tarps. So we didn't have to pay for the dump fees, and we got rid of the tires, got through the process, but it's a little bit crazy.
No kidding, man. Yeah.
Keeps
you on your toes for sure.
Right. So, and have to, you know, Nikki was a huge help in that too, because she had the connection with the dairy and thought of this idea in the first place, because it's very expensive to get rid of tires. Like you can't just leave them at the dump. Like you have hazardous waste material, you know, dump fees and all kinds of stuff. And so that was one. And then, you know, we've had some ones farther back where my dad and I bid on a house at the foreclosure sale. Right after we bid on it, or no, we didn't bid on it. We actually did a redemption of the house after the sale, which is kind of complicated. They changed the laws since then. But along the way, the owner was busted by the police for a meth lab because he got gas, didn't pay for it. Cops saw him do it, left his front door open. Cops walked in, found a meth house. So he got busted, went to jail. So this is back, 15 years ago, before we'd even knew what meth houses were, how they worked or anything. And so we're trying to figure all this out while he's in jail. His friend comes over, sets the house on fire, it burned down. So we got interviewed by the cops, police. They're wondering if we burned it down. We ended up having to rebuild it from scratch, which we did. But yeah, that was another crazy one. A lot of stuff out there. We've had to hold a foreclosure for over a year because the previous owners didn't sue us, but they sued the bank saying it was foreclosed on wrong. We had to hire our own attorneys to get involved. That was a crazy process. Just buying houses I shouldn't buy, like massive foundation issues that have caused me problems over the year. Another property that had 3 houses in a commercial property called the Compound, because the local police called it the Compound, where, right before we bought it, there was a murder suspect who was arrested there. And we had to go through an eviction, cash for keys, cleaned up that whole place. And after we did that, the city gave us issues. Like, that's just a whole nother story. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on there in that book.
Yeah, no kidding, man. We'll make sure to link to your book. And I know you also put out, again, like you said, you put out a ton of great stuff on social media. So is that the best way for people to get in touch with you, Mark?
Yeah, for sure. Like our Instagram page is very active, at Invest for More, and it's Invest FOURMORE. We got 165,000 followers on there. So I'm posting multiple times on there. My YouTube as well. We're almost to 80,000 subscribers on there. We're posting usually at least 3 videos a week on there, showing my properties, what we're buying, our repairs, and advice videos too. So there. And of course, we have a Facebook page too. So I can't always respond to everything, but I do my best to personally respond, answer questions on there. So that's the best way. Like I said, investformore.com. I've got probably 300 articles on there, and lots of resources for flipping, rentals, being an agent, all kinds of great stuff there too. But usually if you go comment on one of my YouTube videos, I'm usually the one who's responding and able to respond back to people. So
amazing. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. Again, really loved your time here. And we'll link to all that stuff within the description here. I know we have free resources as well on scaling your real estate investing. So we'll put that ebook in the description too. But Mark, really appreciate the time. Thanks for the conversation.
Yeah, no problem. And one thing too, that book is ebook and paperback. And then eventually it'll be Audible too. So almost all my books are paperback, ebook, Audible, and even a few are hardcover now too. So thank you, Amazon, for that. So lots of options out there.
Yeah, no kidding, man. And then again, you've got 10 books out there as well. So we'll try to make sure we link to all the, all those resources here. But, again, I really appreciate your time today.
No, thank you so much. Happy to be here. And it's a lot of fun. So thank you.
Yeah. To everyone watching, again, this is Matt Camp with DealMachine, and happy deal finding.